Good to have everybody here, and I don't think we have any people that would be public. We have nobody in the audience, so we'll move right into the approval of the minutes from March 14th. They've been distributed. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
One second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed?
What do you? How many members of the committee do you have? 4?
We have 5 here. We've
Oh, you
got.
have 5.
Yeah. Pardon me?
I'm not a member.
I know. We've got Liz, Brad, Susan, myself, Kristen.
I didn't see Liz. Sorry about that. Yep. Okay.
Oh, Kristen doesn't. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of
And we have Jennifer,
Jennifer. I was thinking of
who
Jennifer.
just runs the show. So. Okay, so we will move into, so what I wanted to do today was to take a break from guests and presentations and those kinds of things and to deliberate a little bit about what are we hearing before we forget what we heard and see whether we've got additional questions, additional issues that we want to raise. Do we have some ideas as to how ARPA funds might be applied, whether it's to the affordable housing, the youth activities. And then also we have the question that Jennifer has raised, because we were in a position last year where we had a kind of an open application period and then closed and then looked at applications, and whether, we don't have to do that again, but whether we want to do that again, particularly after the last conversation where we had the ambulance association in, we had a couple of the youth leagues said they may well be coming in with an independent application. So I just wanted to kind of give ourselves a chance to talk through all of these things, see what direction we wanted to take, and then we will continue on our learning path. So with that in mind, why don't we start? Hey, Casey, why don't we start with affordable housing? And we had Hope came in, gave a kind of a good overview as to who they were, what they were doing. Had some questions, good questions from the committee to them. And I think the question that we've got now is, do we want to use some funding toward some ARPA funding toward affordable housing in Old Saybrook? And if so, in the absence of a project, how would we do that? Is really kind of the question in front of me. And so I'm open. I obviously thought about this and put a recommendation on the table, but I'm also open to people's ideas. So
The only thing I'm concerned about is I'd like to see the possibility of giving them money towards a project that's in Old Saybrook, but I would be not happy about funds being allocated to them and then they do a project and
right.
So that's my only concern is that. Maybe we take a percentage amount or amount that we set aside for a future project for them, pending our due date or end date of our ability to issue funds, so that if they don't meet that deadline, that we can use those funds for something else.
Right, we anticipate what that
Right.
would be. Okay.
And it's just a matter of how much, but.
Any other ideas?
It wasn't your glasses, Kristen. It got blurry there for a minute.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on?
Affordable housing is hard because we don't have a housing unit. We don't have property to build a housing unit on. But would it be appropriate to take funds and have it designated in the town budget as a start of a possible buying property to create apartments or housing? I mean, we don't have that ability. We don't even have really a thing in our budget. We're recognizing that we have a problem with affordable housing. We're recognizing how negative impact it is on the town economics and school system and everything else. Should we put our money where our mouth is and say, all right, we can put the ARPA money, it has to go into this account and it has to be spent by this, but is it, if we do that, and I'm looking at Carl, by our point of view, we spent the money by the due date. Is it legal to put it in the account and have the town use it later?
I don't think so.
I that doesn't sound to me like it meets even it might be good spirit, but I can't imagine that meets the letter of the
Okay.
law.
Yeah.
And throw that one out in the garbage.
Well, not too far, but I think you're a variation on Brad's theme. From what I'm gathering, and some of my thinking as well. I'm thinking that what this committee can do is it can set aside, we've got, for our argument's sake, let's say we've got $1.3 million right now that has not been allocated. So we could take some of that money, set it aside and say there is a housing development, affordable housing development fund. Because what we heard from Hope was don't commit it to solely purchase of land or this or that or other thing, but kind of keep the idea of what it can be used for general, and then be able to then Hope or others who may want to come in and say, okay, we know that there is this, let's say, pot of $500,000 that the town has to be able to support affordable housing. How does that then encourage activity to take place? And so we could incentivize without having to, I don't think the mechanics of putting it in the budget, all of that, somebody else's problem. But we could recommend to the board of selectmen, we think out of the remaining ARPA money, X amount of dollars ought to be set aside for affordable housing. And then we can begin to talk to people about, hey, you want to come to Old Saybrook and develop more Hope? Now you've got some money in the bank. What is that going to do for you? So I think that builds on what you're saying without necessarily, and then, going to what Brad was saying, we know that we've got to commit by, end of 2024, we've got to spend by end of 2026. So there's a trigger somewhere in there that says, hey, if this money isn't going out the door and doesn't look like it's going out the door, pull it back in, reallocate it. I mean, to me.
So that would be, for instance, third quarter of 2023, we would have to rescind the money because of nothing had
Right.
taken place.
Could,
But that would give us a quarter to do something different.
right.
You mean third quarter 2024?
Well, I thought he said it had to be spent, it had to be allocated by 24.
Had to be allocated.
No.
Okay, right, September, end of 2020.
Allocated by 24, spent by 26.
Right, so third quarter then of 24, we would have to pull it back if nothing happened.
And Carl, with something like that, I mean, it would be good to have endorsement by the board of selectmen. But in that kind of, I don't know whether we would even want to take that to a town meeting, right? In the sense of there isn't really a there to take to the town meeting and be able to say, okay, but we all know what we're trying to do with it. And ultimately, when a project comes and we commit that money toward that project, that's what would go to the town meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could segregate the funds and not have to take it to a town meeting right away. So, something I think Brad has stated in the past, and I'll state here just to throw, because we're discussing and why not? Let's say you chose a sum of money, whether it's 250, 500, and you follow, just like we do with elderly tax relief, we follow a state program. Basically, if you have a certain amount of income, if you're single, certain amount of income, if you're married, and a certain amount of assets in total, if you're under those thresholds, you can apply for what we call a senior citizen or elderly benefit and get some deduction off your property taxes. I'm just wondering if there is a formulation where we could say for first-time home buyers, and I know that's something that Brad has mentioned in the past, like encourage somebody who falls into a category and say, there are grants available. There's $15,000 per couple or per house to help you with your down payment. Now, just an idea, but then I heard, I was talking to the chairman of the planning commission, actually, who's a realtor, Norm Prevost. I was talking to him yesterday, and he was telling me about a house on George Drive that is 900 square feet that sold for over $700,000. I think we might have all seen this house on Facebook or know the realtor. I'm not, that's neither here nor there. But I'm like, I don't know where that goes. I mean, I don't even know how you can help someone buy a house, even with $15,000 if they need a mortgage for 600 or, on a 900 square foot house. It's just, now that has to stop at some point, I would think. I don't know. But anyway, that's another idea. I don't want to get into, I really don't want to get on tangents. Another idea to say, if we're putting a large sum of money aside, should we help first-time home buyers? And if so, there's probably parameters out there that we could assign to people to do that. Just an idea. I'm not recommending it. I'm just putting it on the table for discussion.
No, I really like that. And I was going to expand on that to say, building affordable housing is a huge undertaking. So with the money that we have left, I know we all want to do something sort of big and noteworthy, but even if we put 500 aside, it's not enough to buy land and to build.
Right.
And that being said, it would only help, I don't know the numbers, but a handful of people, where it's easy to imagine that if we took 500 grand and put it toward job development, toward something similar to Saybrook Cares, where it's as needed, it just feels like building, it's a very long-term, lofty idea to do the long-term house, to do affordable housing. And there's obviously a need, but maybe if it's grants for first-time home buyers or economic development and helping business owners and that sort of thing, if they're more successful, they can pay their employees more. There's something that starts more on the micro level, helping individuals with that large sum of money than something that would go, take years and years to really actualize.
Yeah, there's a group down in Boston that's doing that, grants for housing, and they do a 5-year plan where if the people keep the house for 5 years, they don't have to pay it back, period. Otherwise, it's 20% a year. And they're doing grants up to, for first-time home buyers, 29,000, which is nice. And then
Which is in Boston.
well, there's a group doing it, but my bank is, I'm not selling my bank right now, but
Okay.
it just been,
Okay.
they're getting that, we're getting 350,000 at my bank to been able to give up to 29,000 for a first-time home buyer. And then they have to meet the 80% of the median income, which in this town, I believe is 90,000 would be the maximum income in order to be in the program. So if we were to do that, we could probably follow their program as far as the guidelines to do with the percentage of income, et cetera.
Do you have some literature on that program?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great to see it.
Yeah.
It's always good to track this, rather than creating something new, if we can build off of something that's already there, that would be great.
And then they have another program called WOKE, and that what that is 3% of it can be a second or third time home buyer, 3% of the purchase price they'll give as a grant. And then, of course, there's credit score criteria and all kinds of criteria, but it's just helping people out to be homeowners. And again, they don't have to pay it back if they keep a home for 5 years. So it's
Just
pretty neat.
to follow up on that, that would be the issue. The way to resolve if someone doesn't keep the home for a certain period of time, 3 years, 5 years, or turns around in 2 years and makes a lot of money on it, is we had another 20 years ago, we got maybe even more, we got a community development block grant to help, I think it was people of a certain income threshold with their septic systems. And there's a lien that goes on the property. So there is a way to protect the investment.
Right. If the house is sold, they
Yeah,
pay back.
recapture. But you're right, it would be a forgivable loan. You know, I don't know if any other towns or counties or states have done anything like that. I think that would be more relevant research, is to see if anybody has used ARPA money for that purpose. I'm going to stop talking because other people haven't commented yet. So
Good.
Well, the chaplain had done a program recently like that, and you know, it's the same type of program, only it's a 10-year program, 10% a year forgiven. So
Casey or Kristen, do you guys have comments?
Yeah, I do. From my perspective, you know, and I understand that, you know, we as a committee aren't going to be able to go in and build an affordable housing development, and that might be a little bit too big of a bite to take. The two things that I'm concerned about are I really, from my perspective, I think somehow incentivizing or encouraging the development of affordable housing is the way to do the greatest good with the least amount of money, because then you can have development of units that are, the town would have a say because it'd be partly town funded. So the town would have a say in terms of what the conditions of the affordability are, what the terms of the affordability are, what the time frame of the affordability restrictions are. And then we, you know, by being able to put a restriction on units, you're able to reach a lot of people. So I mean, if you have an affordability restriction for 40 years, 50 years, which is pretty commonly done, 30 is the requirement under 830G, but towns do more. I've worked in towns that did more. You're able to reach a lot of people that way. So I don't know what the answer is. I just and I'll try to think about it some more, but and you know, hopefully somebody smarter than me has an idea, but I just would really like, if the units aren't out there, then us giving money, if units that people can afford aren't out there, then us giving money to people individually doesn't really help. And so if like Carl alluded to, if I have to, you know, if you have to pay $700,000 to buy a house, and you're making 80% of or 60% of area median income, we're not gonna, we might buy one house for somebody. So, and then the other thing I just want to think about or talk about is, or maybe ask about, is why we feel that it's important to prioritize homeownership versus renters. A lot of young people and young families nowadays rent. Because the younger generation in a lot of ways doesn't really like the commitment of the big, you know, the young professionals don't really like the commitment of a big house with big lawn and all the maintenance commitments and everything, which personally I can relate to many days. But you know, so when I was in my 20s, I lived in a condo. So I want to make sure that we're not being too exclusive, because I also think a lot of people that are in need right now maybe are renting and can't, because of the price of homes, can't afford to buy a home. And those are people, those are young professionals, those are a lot of service workers, those are a lot of you know, people in education, people in first responders. So I just think we should keep that in mind too.
I was at a meeting yesterday and Senator Duff was talking about affordable housing. And this is an issue across Connecticut. It's not just in Old Saybrook. And he said it was interesting that over the years, the average life expectancy doubled. So now people are living, you know, 80, 90s, even 100s, and they're staying in their homes. So those homes aren't being turned over for younger generations. So I thought that was really interesting. And I remember, Carl, you brought up something in the beginning when we started this process about homes that are converted or they add on apartments for seniors or for their parents to have like an in-law apartment to their home, which would free up their home to be sold. But they don't have like the money to like renovate their homes to put in an in-law apartment. So I'm wondering if we go that route for affordable housing.
Create these ADUs you're talking about?
Well, I'm just saying like, there could be people that like could add on to their home, but don't have the money to put their in-laws in or to renovate a room in their house for an in-law who's living at home. So like, you know, people are like in the sandwich generation where they're taking care of their kids, yet they're taking care of their parents who are living in their own homes because that's all they can afford. You know, they can't afford to go into assisted living. They can't, there's a wait list for senior housing. So it's like, I mean, it's just an interesting statistic he mentioned yesterday that we have all these seniors living in their homes that would have normally in, you know, who are living longer. So there's no, so the inventory is not being turned over as fast as it used to be.
Mhm.
Well, that brings us back to Chris Costa that was in here and was telling us about the alternatives to just what Kristen was saying, making an apartment over a garage a perfectly capable, full service apartment, a condo, and then they would rent that separately to whoever was living in the house or vice versa. And she was saying that some of the alternatives that we could use is similar to our industrial park where there's emptiness there because it's a one level. Why can't we put an apartment over on the second level?
Mhm.
And that allows two uses of the same, you know, and I think if we were to go to this road, I think that would be, I think we could find more places to spend that money and have more uses out of it.
I think Bruce, at some point, we should define what properties could be available to do housing.
Mhm.
And personally, I'd like to see some of these motels changed to updated, decent living.
Right.
And
People
then,
could be living in there anyway.
and then the next wave is these new small homes that they're doing.
Yeah.
In fact, Elon Musk just came out with one for 15,000. Comes in a truck and sides fold down and everything, and you've got a 400 square foot home that has everything in it. And in fact, he's living in one. He sold 7 properties in California for 275 million, and now he's living in that Texas. So it's a change.
Right. So,
Carl, wasn't there a law that just going through now where you can build 20 residents on an acre or something? There's some bill coming in?
There's a bill there. There's lots of bills up there. Casey might be more familiar with them than I am, but there's lots of bills in the state legislature about density and
Right.
density as of right. Typically more TOD, transit-oriented development, so within a certain distance from a train station. I can tell you right now that, oh, there goes my dog. Nope. I can tell you right now that I'd love to see some of that in and around our train station. I'm gonna go on mute.
His dog was.
Yeah, well, every time she sits in a window and stares out, every time she sees someone go by, she wants to go out and then she wants to come in, you know, so. But those bills are typically around density in and around public transportation. And I testified last year on the TOD bill. I know there's a lot of towns in Fairfield County who don't like it. I was all for it. I mean, for Old Saybrook, I mean, because what would we like to see on Stage Road, but more apartments? I mean, I'd love that. I think we would permit it. So it would work for Old Saybrook. It doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. But that's what the bills are generally, Brad. Am I right, Casey, typically on that?
I mean, honestly, it's been, I've been out of the loop for a couple of years, so it's mostly just what I see and hear, from other planners that I'm sort of in sync with. But yeah, I mean, I think the discussion is around the things that I'm aware of, or at least I mean, obviously there's been discussion about modifying 830G and that's always back and forth and around. And but yeah, I mean, I think most of what the state is at least trying to promote that I'm aware of for affordable housing is right around TOD, or something else of that nature.
Got it. Okay. Other comments people want to make on this? I think what we ought to do, it sounds like there's, we talk about affordable housing, but there's actually many elements of affordable housing, whether we're talking about single family housing, home ownership, multifamily, renters. A little bit of research around the program that you were talking about, Brad. I think that would be helpful. Maybe what I can do is put some ideas together and come back at the next meeting with a proposal. I think what I did not hear anybody say this is that there would be a disagreement about putting some money aside. And we can then have that debate once we know what it's decided for. Okay.
Hey,
Yep.
Bruce, could we talk about what the, well, I mean, maybe this is premature, but I think in considering the other things we're going to discuss, maybe it would be helpful to have a sense of, or like, maybe this is getting into our next topic, but as we consider going forward with a new round of applications, it would be helpful, I think, to have in the back of our minds how much we're setting aside for this or any other purpose.
I think so, though I think choosing a number and then backing into it might be less useful than if we had a better idea of what we wanted to achieve with the money and then putting a number toward it. So I think maybe we need one more meeting to get there, but I know exactly what you're saying, to do that.
Okay,
The only thing goes is, what Liz said is, I mean, to buy land in this town, I mean, the construction cost sounds to me as though it's a lot of money, and I just don't know, what's in my mind is 300,000, but what are they
Yeah.
gonna do?
Well, I think let's find out. I mean, let's talk to some developers about it. And frankly, we ought to talk to, if we could identify some pieces of property. There's different ways to structure a deal. I mean, it would
So-
be interesting to go in and talk to a property owner about, if we do a multifamily, it's not a buy, but the property owner becomes a partner in it.
So as an example, down the other end of town, they just tore down a hotel. I believe the land's for sale, but I'm not sure. It's either leased or sale. I can't remember. There's a sign there. Maybe we should inquire to see what that is costing, and that would give an idea. And then there's also estimates of cost per square foot to do a project like that, I'm sure that.
Yeah.
And then the guy that owns the shopping center, I can't think of his name. What's the guy's name that owns the shopping center?
Matt Rubin.
No, the other one.
Online.
Yeah, right. I believe he's got the sign there for sale, that land I'm talking about, so.
Okay.
he gives you a-
Well, And just one more thing anecdotally that Brad made me think of, and maybe there's something to think about is a lot of times there are developers that are maybe looking to do maybe it's a developer that's looking to do like a mixed use development or something of that nature that we want anyhow. And they're not going to do affordable housing because they just can't quite get there in terms of making the finances work. And so sometimes if we can do something to just sort of like fill in that gap or that last layer, then maybe that's in order for them to have affordable units or a higher percentage of affordable units or a certain percentage of affordable units or something like that. Then sometimes that can be enough to kind of make the difference in some sort of partnership. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I mean, maybe that's a way to make the money go a little bit further, to use less money and make it go a little further.
Yep, Carl.
Yeah, I didn't want to start talking over anybody, so I thought I'd go through the chair and raise my hand. Yeah, so there is the Hope Partnership model, which is either taking a structure, piece of land, and renovating it like they did in Spencer's Corner, or and they're a nonprofit, or what they did on Ferry Road, which is they were given land, Superfund site, and they were able to build it from there because they didn't have land acquisition costs. So there's that, and they're able to get a little bit more density. The other model is something like, and I'm only because he's doing it in town right now, is what Mike Picard is doing over on Lynn Street between Route 1 and Elm Street. Now, do we want to partner with someone who is for profit, or do we want to partner with a nonprofit? Bruce and I have talked about this a little bit. I mean, Mike Picard was going to do a mixed use development on the other side of the road. But he's not going to do that anymore because mixed use is more difficult, he feels, at this point. He's about to put up, or about to start construction, I think, this year, on the side of the road that he has already acquired everything. And there's the restaurant that he's been building that is being built for a very long time. He's going to put in like 29 more units over there. And there's going to be an affordable component. So, it would probably, and I think, as I said, on the TJ side of the road, he doesn't want to do mixed use anymore. He would like to do more residential, and he would probably do an apartment building. So it would be easy to approach someone like that and say, hey, are you going to do it? If you're not going to do it, we have this seed money. How do we make it work? Now, I don't know that we're in the business of doing that. That would involve lawyers, and because we're dealing with someone who's in it for profit, and are we contributing to the for-profit nature of, we're not going to see a return on that other than, some affordable apartments that maybe he would have done anyway. But there's two models here. That's one point. The other point is,
Carl, can I talk over you just a second? I mean, go to Casey's point then. By putting some money into it, we could get, even if he was going to do it anyway, we could get more affordable units. Maybe he would put 15 units over there, was planning to do 3, but now could do 9 because there's some money there.
that's worth a conversation. That might be worth a conversation. Good point. Didn't think of that. The other huge need in this town, and I get random calls, I get them relatively frequently, senior housing, affordable senior housing, which there is, we're talking about affordable housing maybe for workforce housing and things like that, but affordable housing for seniors is, there's just nothing available other than what's on Sheffield Street. I don't say, I'm not trying to start another string of conversation, but that is a huge need in our area. Just kind of to comment.
So I'm going to close this part of the conversation out and just ask, there in 21, there is a report by a group of Old Saybrook residents and boards and commissions, affordable housing report. So, I mean, it's recent, it's within the last 2 years. Has everybody seen it? And if not, maybe Jennifer, we can get it sent out to everybody, because it has a good, it gives a lot of information about affordable housing and then a whole set of recommendations. And that could be something that brings us all to kind of a similar level of understanding as well. Okay, so let's jump into the youth sports question. And what I will kind of summarize is we had from Ray Allen a bunch of good ideas about projects. He'd obviously put some time into it, and thanks to the Park and Rec Commission for their work in it, Susan. And also heard from the leagues, and it sounded to me to a large degree that the leagues were pretty much in agreement on the project side, except for one project, and that was the Ray had not mentioned because it happens to be school property, the door in the middle school. The partition. Brad and I had the opportunity at the Board of Finance meeting to be meeting with folks from the Board of Education, and I asked them about that $30,000 that they had said that was going to cost, and I was laughed out of the room that it was not going to be $30,000, but so there's a number there if we wanted to go, but that number is not $30,000 to be able to do that. But and then similarly to where we were last year around this time, where Ray and Parks and Rec had put together some good ideas. If in fact we also have some funding at the end of the fiscal year where we have some surplus funds. You know, Carl had mentioned being able to put some funds toward that. So to me, that's kind of the summary of what we learned and what we heard. Be interested in people's perspective about whether are there particular projects that people would like to put money to? Is there more information we want to get? How would we want to proceed there?
The only concern I have is, there seems to be a lot of one bids or one quote on all these projects that he presented. And that really is bothersome to me. That 100,000 to fix the soccer field. Very Road. I talked to a couple of people about it, and they thought it was, just totally unnecessary. They just thought that it could be just trenched every 10 feet and put a drain pipe in.
Oh, really?
Along back, yeah, instead of taking all along off the whole field type thing. So I'm just concerned that I don't know whose job it is, but he's coming in with one quote. I'd like to know 3 quotes.
Yep.
And I'd like maybe the town engineer needs to be involved in that project because of the fact that what the land was used for previously. I just don't feel real comfortable disturbing that soil too much.
Without knowing more.
Right.
Okay.
And I felt that way with the project over at Trask Road. I'm not against any of the projects. I'm just
One
concerned
more.
about one bid, one price.
I think the thinking was, he has to give you a ballpark, and so he was able to get that one price. But if we were to decide on something, whether it be a commission decision, we're gonna go ahead with this and then maybe request from
It
ARPA.
sounds good when you say that, but past history hasn't shown that. That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, all right. That's easy enough to do. Other ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point to hone in on these numbers. I wasn't so impressed with all those guys saying like other people come to our town and they don't think our fields are good enough. And I don't think that we should be peer pressured into having better fields, but as someone who spends way too much time on all of those fields, they need to be, it's just not even safe. Some of these kids the fact they don't have sprained ankles down Maple Avenue. It really does need it. There absolutely is a need. And one thing that these guys didn't talk about is that, yes, we know that it brings people together for teams, and teams are very important for our children, but it brings whole communities together. There's always a contingent of little siblings that are playing, and it's so great that there's a playground going in. Parents get together, it's social. I think it hits so many of the targets that we're trying to accomplish in a community that we have. We have an active community here, which is fantastic. And there were some other things that when I spoke to Jonna that he had mentioned, storage and there's some $100,000-ish projects and there's some $10,000 projects. And I just don't see any of them, as long as they're budgeted correctly and it's an honest number, I would throw my weight behind all of them.
Casey? Any thoughts?
I kind of agree with everything that's been said. I mean, I see that I think it's important for the vitality of the town. I think it's important for our children. I think there is something about, I think COVID sort of isolated people, and I think it's important for us to put money towards bringing people and bringing our children back together and giving them socialization opportunities and keeping them safe. I wonder if maybe one of the ways we could sort of prioritize some of these proposals is to look at what things we think are most directly related to or do most directly solve problems that were created by COVID. So like a drainage issue in the fields, I think is probably something that pre-existed COVID. So I think it's important that we solve it. And it's an infrastructure issue, so obviously we could use ARPA money for it. But I'm wondering if that's one way to sort of narrow down some of the options. Or, I mean, I guess I'm wondering if everybody wants to. I'm assuming we're going to narrow it down on some level. So,
I would say too, like, my daughter's not playing sports in Old Saybrook anymore, but when we did and we went to other towns who had like really nice fields and really nice, park and rec areas, like Old Saybrook is such a great community. People live here because it's such a nice town, but our fields and everything are subpar. So I think we should, I'm all in agreement for putting some money towards park and rec and bringing our fields and for our children up to par with like similar towns that have, put a lot more money into that than we have. And I don't have a kid playing soccer and lacrosse or anything like that anymore in town, so.
This is Maureen, and I apologize. I dialed in late. I just wanted to be on record that I'm on for capturing minutes, and I was not at the Park and Rec discussion, but I echo the sentiments of, as a mom of young kids in town, I echo everybody's sentiments about wanting to see some improvement to the facilities here.
Go ahead, Carl.
To the chairman of the Park and Rec Commission, with regard to the field over Ferry Point, why don't Ray and I can contact Jeff Jacobson and get Jeff, see what the potential solutions are over there. And whether there is a different solution than what was recommended. Susan, where did Ray get that particular, let's dig up the field, let's put in stone, and where did that come from?
Well, we had a discussion on that within the commission. And we were also looking at the monies that would be available, and that seemed to be the best way to get that field a little bit more elevated. It is so close to the salt marsh that the water level underneath it is an issue. Having sea level rise every storm is an issue. And we thought that if we were able to create the aggregate underneath so that it would drain properly, and then put more layers of loam or dirt on top so that the grasses would then have a longer root system, so that you wouldn't have to irrigate them so much, and then have the irrigation already placed in there, would greatly improve that field.
But who came up?
I mean, as a commission, as a chairman of the commission, we're always balancing the money of what we would like and what we have, and then we're handling this parcel of land was given to us, but it wouldn't have been my choice of a recreation field because of where it was and what it was used before. But we were given this, so now we're trying to build it into a recreation field.
So who did was it B&L, or was it who gave you the idea and the number?
Honestly, I'm gonna have to go back over my notes to see.
All right, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I
So-
mean, it's honest, I don't
No, I
know.
think
But
with
I
regard
get
to that, we could probably involve the town's consulting engineer, which we seem to involve on every project, and they're very busy. I guess my comment, well, just to end, from personal experience, anecdotally, in colder weather, when no one's using the field, I will go on McMurray Field over by the firehouse, close all the gates, bring my dog, and she likes to chase a ball, and I can let her loose in there, and I'm not bothering anybody, obviously pick up. But there are some, I was actually surprised, there are some holes in the outfield. And I thought McMurray Field was in good condition, and I was a little disappointed in the outfield. So I don't know, was McMurray Field on the list, Susan?
Just for
Just
the
for the
scoreboard.
fences and the
Scoreboard.
scoreboard, yeah.
Okay.
I'm writing it down as you're saying it, so I will bring it up to him.
I mean, there are some holes in the outfield, and I just was like, wow, those are ankle twisters at the very least. Again, other than Town Park, which is a much larger project, which is probably 7 figures. Every other project was a manageable number. So let's say Ferry Road Field is 100,000 or less. And then you add that up with all the other projects. I mean, they were all very manageable. The town, as Bruce and Brad know, is going to have a very large surplus this year. So what I would say to Park and Rec is satisfy the Board of Finance, and if you need help drafting a bid spec or getting multiple quotes, let's do that now, because the surplus money needs to be allocated. The surplus money for fiscal 23 will need to be allocated in August, September, approximately at the latest. So it's 5 months away, and getting bids on, some of the work is relatively simple. But Ferry Road Field should be one that we focus on, how to better handle the drainage there. And I'm not sure how to do that. Let's get some bids now. Let's get those projects teed up. And then perhaps it could be a combination of either surplus funds and ARPA funds. And it would not be a heavy lift, I don't think, for either category.
Right. And I think to some degree, what we got to do is, following Casey's question at the last meeting to Ray about could he put these in priority order? So he could put them in priority order. We could then, from an ARPA side, make some commitments that get things going, while then ultimately we figure out what the surplus is, 5 months down the road. Because some of these, as you say, they're not that big, but if $15,000 for irrigation at Maple Ave, this might be the time to be able to do that, in order to get it in, so that it's ready for the fall. And that's something we could do at ARPA pretty quickly.
Well, the way I look at it is, look at all those projects came to like 650, I believe.
516.
516, so I mean, if the town kicked in 250 and ARPA funds kicked in 250, we could get it done.
We knock it out, right?
Yeah.
And that's before we get competitive prices.
I wrote that down.
And
No one's seen.
And there'd be a significant improvement in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
because it's already from last year, either capital projects that were in the budget or surplus funds. We're knocking off another 7 or 8 projects at Park and Rec. So there's a lot of improvements, but I wholeheartedly agree. I think Park and Rec is critical to bringing families into town. It's critical to bringing visitors into town. It's a lifestyle thing. It's quality of life thing for I mean, it's just it hits on so many cylinders to me that investing $500,000, and I know I don't mean to throw numbers around like it's nothing, but investing that has a return on it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, and we heard it from the folks who are doing from the leagues. from what Liz is saying, I think, it goes well beyond what we had, it's just a straight investment, so that's good.
Just remember, people move to this town, one reason is we have low taxes. I mean, I'll be straight out, Madison has a lot of new amenities. But their taxes are about 50% higher than ours. So we gotta keep that in mind.
A little
Yeah,
balance.
so we're in a good situation though. We can make a lot of improvements because, we've had a couple of years of good surpluses too. So we can make these improvements and not have it impact the mill rate, I think.
Okay, any other issues on that? All right, we'll come back with a proposal in that regard, and so that then leads us into the last discussion, which is how to handle new applications. And I'll just start the conversation simply by saying, right now, it's like we're not getting the door knocked down. Unless Jennifer, you've got more phone calls than I'm aware of at this stage of the game. And so I don't think we ought to create kind of another application period. I would say that the committee is willing to listen to, read, discuss any applications that come in. And if we're in a position kind of on a rolling basis, and if we're in a position where all of a sudden we're getting a lot, then we can change that plan. But I'm not sure we need to do an ollie entry at this stage of the game. Is anybody disagreeing with that?
I agree.
Yeah. How much money is left?
1.3.
1.3.
1.3. And then so round numbers, we're saying 500-ish or 250-ish for Parks and Rec and 500-ish for affordable housing. There's 25 in here for the ambulance. Is it worth it to go revisit some of those associations where we didn't give them full funding? For example, my mind goes to the estuary center that could really, I think it was estuary that needed a new truck, a refrigerated truck for Meals on Wheels, but they didn't want to ask for it. Is it rather than waiting and looking for an extra 300 grand to spend somewhere, to go back to the people that put in the work, that made the presentations, that quantified everything and did the application, and spread the wealth there a bit more if there are things that we didn't fully fund.
I think, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Bruce.
I was gonna say I think that's an alternative that if we found ourselves in a position of kind of needing to get the money out
The door, but we've got
time
time for that.
and be able to kind of,
But it also seems as though if we've been at this for over a year, that if somebody really had a need for the money, a small business or something of that nature, that they would have found us already.
right. Well, but there's also one issue that we've said we wanted to get engaged in that we haven't talked about. And I didn't want to overload us with the third one until we kind of talked through that. And that was this whole co-working business development space. And so I've been reaching out to some of those spaces, and I'd like to invite some people who have developed those in other towns to come and talk to us about what it would look like. So maybe at our next meeting, if I can make that arrangement, or if not, it would be the following meeting. So I think there may well be another area where we could put some money and make a difference.
Good chunk of that. Yeah, that sounds great.
Carl, I interrupted you.
No, there's time. That's what I would say. And I'm not against revisiting Liz, but there's a reason why it's 2024. We should be, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate this committee. Okay. You're putting in a lot of time, a lot of extra time. And I look at Casey and I'm like, here she is volunteering with a baby on her shoulder. And when you said earlier you haven't had time to keep up on stuff, I was like, why? What's she been doing? But
The fact that she named the baby.
yeah. That's a good name. But I think there is time. I think we could do both. We could go back and look to see if we should add a few extra dollars to some of the applications that came in, but there is time and there's always the ability to use it on town infrastructure. I know that's not the sexiest thing out there, but Chalker's Mill Pond Dam is a dam that needs to be repaired. And quite frankly, right now, I don't have the funding for engineering and I don't have the funding. Well, I could probably find the funding for the fix, but it's 50,000 in engineering. I could use that money for engineering right now to get this dam. And then we could use a different bucket, which would be the capital non-recurring fund to actually get this project done because it's a dam that is not in great condition. I mean, I can think of a bunch of reasons. But let's continue that conversation.
Okay. Good.
I might want to poll the committee about the next meeting because it's like school vacation time.
Oh, good call. I won't be here.
So we are.
Before you go making arrangements.
First,
for good time.
second, third, fourth. So it would be the 11th.
11, yeah.
Who's available on the 11th?
It's Maureen. We are away. I'm not available.
Okay, sounds like Liz is not available. Casey, no one way or the other?
I'm available.
All right. Well, let's see, let's find out what comes up over the next 2 weeks, knowing that we've lost a couple of people. I'll be in touch with Judy on this co-working thing, so I'll know more about what's going on with her and we can figure it out from there. All right. Any comments from members of the committee? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn.
So
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
I
Bye.
Okay.